Welcome, traveler. I am the historian. Tonight, we drift once more into the old world, where myths breathe like embers beneath the dust of time, and where grief, like a long echo in a quiet valley, shapes the destinies of mortals and gods alike. Come, sit beside me near the dim glow of this ancient lamp. Let us wander through a tale of music, devotion, and the fragile thread that binds love to the living. This is the lament of Orpheus, a song that could not save her. The morning light had only just begun to stretch across the hills when Orpheus first lifted his lyre to greet the day. The air held that delicate stillness that exists only in the minutes before dawn, a hush so complete that even the rustling leaves seemed hesitant to disturb it. Orpheus sat on a smooth stone overlooking the valley below, his fingers gliding across the strings with the tenderness of someone coaxing a dream into wakefulness. Each note shimmered through the cool air, moving like drifting threads of gold. Birds paused mid-flight, hovering as if suspended between worlds. Deer stepped lightly from the tree line, their breaths rising in quiet plumes. His music did not command the world, it invited it, and every sunrise nature accepted. But even as he played, Orpheus felt the familiar ache in his chest, the soft echo that lived there since the day Eurydice first crossed his path. Her presence had changed his music, it had deepened it. He remembered the way she listened, fully without distraction, eyes half closed, as though she could see the shape of the song forming in the air. He remembered the warmth in her laughter, the gentleness in her footsteps, and the way she breathed in wonder at even the smallest marvels. This chapter of their story was quiet, simple, filled with the tender beginnings of love. And though Orpheus did not yet know it, those mornings would soon become memories held more tightly than any melody. Orpheus often stayed long after the sun crested the hills, letting the world slowly wake around him. He would watch the shadows retreat into the forest as beams of light spilled across the fields, illuminating patches of wildflowers that swayed as though dancing to his tune. Sometimes he imagined the wind carried his music to distant villages, where shepherds paused mid-step to listen. Other times he imagined the gods themselves leaned closer. Yet to him, the true magic was not in who listened. It was in the simple act of creating harmony in an otherwise restless world. He played until birds found their voices again, and the sky turned a pale gold. Only then would he lower his lyre, exhaling softly, as if releasing a dream back into the morning air. The valley did not merely witness their love, it nurtured it. When they first began to walk its winding paths together, Orpheus found the world subtly reshaping itself around Eurydice. Flowers seemed to bloom more eagerly where her feet passed. The wind softened when it touched her hair. They spoke often of small things, the shape of clouds drifting across the sky, the curious way cicadas quieted when Orpheus tuned his lyre, the mystery of why some ancient trees grew twisted toward the sun. Their conversations were not grand declarations. They were gentle, unhurried exchanges that deepened their bond. At times, they paused beside the riverbanks, tossing small stones into the current. Eurydice laughed as she tried, and failed, to skip them across the surface. Orpheus showed her how to angle her wrist, how to release the stone just so. And when she finally succeeded, her cheer echoed through the groves. He played for her often in these days. Slow songs, bright songs, songs shaped by wonder. And with every note, Eurydice's eyes softened in a way that told him she heard more than sound. The valley became their world, one shaped by shared steps, whispered dreams, and days that flowed as gently as water. They walked along winding paths, where sunlight filtered through olive branches, painting soft, shifting lines on their faces. Eurydice delighted in the little wonders others overlooked. The scent of wild thyme crushed beneath her feet, the murmur of streams threading through stone, the way shadows played across Orpheus's tunic as he walked ahead of her. When he played for her, she did not simply listen, she surrendered herself to the music. And Orpheus, watching her eyes grow soft with emotion, found that he was no longer playing for the world. He was playing for her. Their wedding was humble. No golden halls, no feasts, no procession of nobles. Only a grove of ancient trees witnessing two souls joining. The wind blew softly, carrying their vows into the branches. For a time, it felt as though even the gods smiled upon them. Their days unfolded in peaceful rhythm. They rose with the dawn, shared figs and honey beneath the shade of an elder tree, and wandered until evening draped the valley in soft blue. Orpheus would pause often, struck by the quiet joy of simply walking beside her. Eurydice would gather sprigs of mint, weaving them into simple crowns for them both. She would place one on his head, laughing softly when it tilted to one side. At night, they lay beneath a tapestry of stars. Orpheus played lullabies shaped from constellations, each note honoring a different glimmering light. Eurydice traced patterns on his hand as she listened, her breath warm against his shoulder. In these moments, time felt unhurried, held gently by their shared presence. Eurydice walked through a sunlit meadow, her laughter rising like bells. She bent to gather a cluster of pale flowers, soft as moonlight, and for a moment, the world felt as still as the first breath after creation. But beneath the blooms, a serpent hid. It struck with the swiftness of a shadow. Eurydice gasped, clutching her ankle as the venom spread like fire through her veins. Orpheus heard her cry. He ran, heart pounding, but reached her only in time to hold her as the final breath left her lips. She shaped his name with fading voice, her eyes searching his face with a sorrow deeper than fear. He called for the gods, for the earth, for anything that might return her to him. Nothing answered. The meadow, once bright and alive, seemed to dim around him. The sky clouded as though mirroring his grief. Even the wind stilled, offering no comfort. Orpheus pressed his forehead to hers, whispering promises he knew she could no longer hear. He held her until her warmth faded, until the flowers she had gathered slipped from her hand one by one. Animals stood at the edge of the clearing, not daring to approach, yet unwilling to leave him alone. A doe bowed its head. A nightingale perched on a branch, silent. The world shared his sorrow. Orpheus lifted her gently and carried her to the grove where they had wed. There, beneath the ancient trees, he laid her down, surrounded by the same soft winds that once celebrated their vows. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Orpheus remained beside her, refusing to leave the place where joy had ended and mourning began. In the days that followed, grief hollowed Orpheus. Food lost its taste, light lost its warmth. His fingers, once so sure upon the lyre, trembled. Then one night, he sat beneath the olive tree where they had first shared stories. He lifted his lyre but did not play. Instead, he closed his eyes and breathed in the memory of her, her voice, her smile, the soft warmth of her hand in his. He struck a single note. It wavered, more fragile than even he expected. But from that note grew another, and then another. Grief shaped each sound into something raw, full of longing. The music became a plea. When the final chord faded, Orpheus knew what he must do. If the gods would not return Eurydice, Then he would descend into the underworld and bring her back himself. That night, shadows stirred around him as he played, slow, sorrowful figures drawn from memory and loss. He felt the air shift, as though unseen listeners gathered among the trees. He spoke aloud to the darkness, telling it of Eurydice, her kindness, her laughter, the way she brightened the dullest of days. His words wavered, but the forest seemed to lean closer, listening. A soft breeze brushed his cheek, like a final caress from her spirit. It steeled his resolve. He rose with purpose, clutching his lyre to his chest. The world seemed apart for him as he walked, animals stepping aside, branches bending just enough to clear his path. He would journey into shadow for her. He would break the boundary between life and death itself. The path toward the underworld was not a straight one. It wound through forests where sunlight thinned, through ravines where moss clung like ancient memories. Orpheus walked for days, perhaps weeks. Time blurred beneath the weight of grief. Animals followed at first, but gradually they stopped at the borders of places no mortal feet should tread. The earth darkened under his steps. Trees gave way to skeletal trunks, their branches stripped bare by winds that did not belong to the living world. The ground grew cold, then colder still, until frost clung to Orpheus's sandals. Yet he pressed on, guided by nothing more than determination and the faint pull of love. When he finally reached the cleft in the earth, a wound in the hillside, it pulsed faintly, as though breathing. This was no grand threshold. It was simply the place where the worlds grew thin. Inside, the descent felt endless. The tunnel walls glistened with trapped shadows. Some whispered as he passed. Others watched. At last, the cavern opened to the vast shoreline of the Styx. The entrance to the underworld was no grand gate, no carved archway. Merely a cleft in the earth hidden among ancient cypress roots. Yet Orpheus felt its presence long before he reached it. The air cooled, the birds fell silent, and even the wind seemed to hesitate, as though unwilling to follow him further. A faint resonance hummed from the fissure below, an ancient vibration like the breath of the world's oldest memory. Orpheus stepped toward it, his heartbeat echoing against the stone. As he descended, the daylight dimmed behind him, swallowed by layers of shadow. The earth pressed inward, the walls narrowing to a stony throat that carried him downward. His footsteps softened as the ground became damp with centuries of stillness. The cavern widened at last into a shoreline. Before him stretched the river Styx, dark as obsidian and utterly silent. Souls drifted across its surface like pale smoke. Charon stood waiting, hood drawn low, skeletal hands wrapped around his pole. The ferryman's hollow gaze assessed Orpheus with neither curiosity nor disdain. It was the stare of one who had witnessed the march of all mortal sorrow and found none of it surprising. Orpheus did not speak. He raised his lyre. The melody he played was not merely sorrow. It was surrender, longing, devotion, and the raw ache of a heart cracked open. The sound rippled across the Styx, stirring the river into faint glimmers. Charon's fingers loosened around the pole. Though his face barely shifted, something in him, some remnant of who he once had been, tilted toward the sound. Without a word, he extended his hand. Orpheus stepped onto the boat. The ferry drifted across the water, guided not by Charon alone but by the steady heartbeat of the music that continued to hum from Orpheus's strings. The Styx was only the first of the underworld's rivers. As the boat glided further, Orpheus glimpsed distant tributaries feeding into the dark expanse. Lethe, shimmering faintly with waters of forgetfulness, its surface rippling with memories dissolving like ink in water. Acheron, the river of woe, its distant waves groaning like mourners in endless procession, and still deeper, the faint rumble of Phlegethon, the river of flame, casting dull red glows along stone ceilings miles away. These rivers did not meet. They echoed one another, forming the veins of a world shaped by memory, loss, and consequence. Even Charon seemed smaller against this vastness. At times, Orpheus glimpsed faint shapes drifting along the Lethe, souls surrendering their pasts. They passed silently, slipping into forgetfulness with gentle resignation. Some paused, as though hearing fragments of his music, their fading eyes lifting in fleeting wonder. At last, he reached the throne room, a chamber carved from the world's first stones. Hades sat upon a throne of shadowed iron, his presence still as a winter lake. Persephone beside him glowed faintly, her aura a quiet reminder of spring trapped beneath the earth. Orpheus lifted his lyre, and once more he played. The hall softened, shadows thinned. Even Hades leaned forward, chin resting upon his fist. When the last strand of sound dissolved, the underworld exhaled, the kingdom where silence reigns, asterisk, asterisk. The underworld was not a realm of fire, but of shadows and stillness. Souls drifted like mist, their movements soft and uncertain. As Orpheus walked, he played. His music softened the gloom, warming the cold air. Spirits gathered around him, drawn not by command, but by the faint glow of hope they had not felt in lifetimes. Cerberus, the great three-headed hound, emerged from the darkness, eyes burning like embers. The beast growled, a sound that shook the stone beneath Orpheus's feet. He played. Cerberus's growl softened, its heads lowered, resting upon the ground, lulled into peace. Deeper he traveled, past fields of asphodel and through caverns where shadows whispered memory. At last he reached the throne of Hades and Persephone. Hades, stern and cold as winter stone, regarded him with unreadable eyes. Persephone's gaze, gentler, held a quiet sorrow of its own. Orpheus lifted his lyre, and he played not just grief, he played love. The melody rose around them like starlight, filling the hall with something no mortal had ever brought to this realm. The warmth of life. Even the silence wept. Silence settled over the hall, thick and resonant. Hades studied Orpheus for a long moment, long enough for the weight of ages to be felt pressing through the air. Finally, he spoke, his voice deep enough to vibrate the very stone. Your music is a river that carries truth, mortal, and truth is rare in my kingdom. Persephone's gaze softened, her eyes reflecting both sorrow and memory. Hades continued, you may lead Eurydice back to the world above, but she must walk behind you. And until both of you stand beneath the living sky, you must not look back. If you turn even once before that moment, his words curled through the air like smoke, she will be lost to you forever. Persephone added, her voice gentle as petals falling upon stone. Trust your love, Orpheus. Do not let fear speak louder than your heart. Orpheus bowed, though his chest trembled. He accepted the bargain. The ascent did not begin immediately. First came the long passage through the quiet plains of asphodel, where countless souls wandered in gentle confusion. They drifted like pale reeds in a silent current, brushing against Orpheus as he passed. Some paused, recognizing the faint glow his music left behind. They followed him for a time, drawn to the promise of warmth. Beyond asphodel lay a series of caverns where the ceiling arched high overhead like the ribcage of a fallen titan. Ancient inscriptions marked the walls, stories carved by hands long forgotten. Orpheus could not read many of them, yet he felt their meaning. Grief, longing, the weight of final goodbyes. He walked slowly here, fearing that Eurydice might stumble in the uneven ground. Though he could not turn, he sensed her presence, a soft pull at his back, like a familiar melody half heard. When they reached the spiral halls, time twisted strangely. Steps echoed twice, once in the present, and once a moment delayed, as though the tunnel itself remembered each movement. Here doubt struck hardest. Orpheus felt the memories of other lovers who had climbed this same path and failed. He pressed forward. Eurydice stepped from the shadows, a faint figure, her form shimmering like a reflection on rippling water. Orpheus felt her presence before he dared look, a warmth blooming at his back. He turned away, as required, and began the ascent. The tunnels wound upward in twisting spirals. Some passages narrowed so tightly that his shoulders brushed stone. Others opened into vast caverns where faint ghosts drifted like pale stars. His footsteps echoed. Hers did not, but he felt her, soft as a breath behind him. Still, doubt gnawed at him. In the underworld, time stretched strangely, bending into unfamiliar shapes. Minutes felt like hours, hours like days. He imagined her stumbling. He imagined her being pulled back by unseen hands. He imagined her fading again, slipping away just beyond reach. To steady himself, he whispered encouragement, not to her, but to the silence. "We are nearly there." He placed his hand on the tunnel wall, grounding himself. The stone felt cold, but it did not resist. Even the underworld seemed to want him to succeed. The air slowly warmed. The scent of earth replaced the metallic tang of shadow. A faint breeze brushed his cheek. But even as warmth returned, Orpheus's fear grew sharper. He felt Eurydice falter, perhaps only in imagination, perhaps in truth. A tremor in the silence behind him made his breath catch. The underworld was alive with illusions, with echoes of longing twisted into traps. He wished to speak her name, but the rule held him like a chain. At times he sensed her reaching out, her fingers brushing the air where his shoulder should have been. A longing so pure it felt like a physical presence. Yet he could not turn, and in the deeper stretches of the tunnel, he heard faint whispers, lost souls murmuring warnings, or perhaps memories. Trust, trust. But trust and fear often wore the same mask. Ahead, light gathered like the first breath of dawn. The ascent toward light, asterisk, asterisk. The ascent was long and winding. The tunnels twisted like veins through the earth, each step carrying Orpheus closer to hope and deeper into doubt. He could not hear Eurydice behind him. He dared not speak her name. The silence pressed upon him, heavy as stone. But he imagined her steps. He imagined her breath. He imagined her reaching toward him. Time stretched, moving slowly as dripping water. Still he climbed. At last, a sliver of light appeared, thin as a thread, bright as salvation. Orpheus stepped into it, feeling warmth touch his skin. Behind him, darkness remained. He hesitated. Was she truly there? Had she stumbled? Had something taken her? Had the gods deceived him? Fear curled its fingers around his heart. He whispered her name, and in that fragile, trembling moment, he turned. Eurydice reached for him, her face filled with sorrow, not for herself, but for him. Then she was gone. The sunlight dimmed as if mourning her loss. Orpheus's lyre slipped from his hands, striking the ground with a hollow sound that echoed through the valley. He fell to his knees, the weight of his choice crushing him. The wind carried his cry across the rocks and hills, a sound that would linger for generations. The world felt emptier than ever before. Orpheus wandered for months, each step uncertain. He no longer sought crowds or praise. He walked in solitude, letting the land be his only companion. His songs changed. They carried the softness of heartbreak, the trembling quiet of someone remembering a touch they would never feel again. Animals still followed him, sensing the depth of his sorrow. They lay beside him as he played, offering comfort in the only way they knew. The world listened. He returned to the meadow, the place where she had laughed among the flowers, and sat beneath the olive tree where they had once spoken of the future. He lifted his lyre one last time. The song he played was unlike any he had created before. It held every moment they had shared, every kiss, every whisper, every dream. When the final note faded, he exhaled, not in despair, but in peace. In time, his spirit drifted beyond the veil, reunited with Eurydice. Not through tragedy, but through the gentle closing of a life shaped by love. Travelers who passed through the valley spoke of a strange hush, a reverence in the air, as though the earth itself remembered. The lyre lay beneath the olive tree, untouched yet honored by all who found it. Even the muses, who rarely mourned, wept upon the wind. On certain nights, when the moon hung low and pale, an echo drifted through the air, a melody soft as a heartbeat. But this valley held more than memory. It held mythic residue, the kind that lingers where great stories end. Some claimed the nymphs still danced there, tracing the outline of Eurydice's final steps. Others said Apollo himself once stood over the lyre, bowing his head in grief. The echo did not merely repeat Orpheus's music, it remembered him. The tale of Orpheus and Eurydice spread far beyond the valley. Poets carried it on their tongues, sculptors traced it into marble, and singers shaped entire epics from the lingering sorrow of his final notes. But with time came interpretation, and with interpretation came symbolism. Some said Orpheus's descent represented the soul's journey through mourning, the darkness, the longing, the fragile ascent toward healing. Others believed Eurydice embodied the temporary nature of joy, beautiful, cherished, but always fragile. Ancient scholars whispered that Orpheus's music bridged the realms not because it was perfect, but because it was true. His love stripped away the boundaries between worlds. And yet, there was more to this myth than tragedy. To fully understand Orpheus's journey, one must understand the land he entered. The Greeks believed the underworld was layered, shifting, and vast. The fields of asphodel stretched endlessly, where ordinary souls wandered in quiet reflection. Deeper still lay Tartarus, a prison of primordial darkness. But in the soft middle realm existed the Elysian fields, reserved for heroes and the blessed. Orpheus walked through all these shadows, not as a hero but as a lover. And love in Greek myth was often considered a force more powerful than fate itself. The Muses, daughters of memory, saw in Orpheus a mirror of their divine purpose. They mourned him not only for his loss, but for the beauty he brought to the world. Some say they carried his lyre to the heavens, where it glows still as the constellation Lyra. Others say it stayed beneath the olive tree, humming gently when moonlight touched its strings. Both versions are true, in the way all myths are. In later centuries, philosophers would say that Orpheus's journey marked the boundary between mortal hope and divine decree. But storytellers, those who kept his tale alive through firelit nights, believed something gentler. They said his descent taught the world that love does not die with the body, They said his ascent taught the world that fear is the shadow cast by devotion. And they said his final look, tragic though it was, became a symbol that even the purest love is shaped by human frailty. Yet myth never ends where the story stops. Some versions claim Orpheus's voice can still be heard in caves where light never reaches. Others say he guides wandering souls across forgotten borders of the underworld, his music now a lantern for those who fear the dark. Whether these tales are truth or dream hardly matters. Myth lives because we need it. In the centuries that followed Orpheus's tale, storytellers whispered of realms he had glimpsed but never spoken of, hidden passages, forgotten courts, and ancient beings that stirred only when the purest music reached their ears. Some said Orpheus passed through the cavern of echoes, where every sound ever uttered still drifted in spirals of memory. Here, the laughter of lost children mingled with the roars of long-dead beasts. His presence awakened these echoes, drawing them together like threads of a forgotten tapestry. They say he paused, listening as voices from ages past formed harmonies that resonated with his own grief. Deeper still lay the Hall of Unborn Dreams, a place where the hopes of mortals who never lived flickered like pale lanterns. Orpheus felt these lights brush against him as he walked, a gentle reminder of paths never taken and futures that dissolved before beginning. Few mortals ever learned of the ancient archive where the underworld kept its oldest memories. Shelves carved from petrified moonlight stretched endlessly. Scrolls woven from shadow tides unrolled of their own accord, whispering tales so ancient they predated the gods. Orpheus, guided then by a sorrow that softened the very walls, entered this sacred record. The scrolls lifted toward him like birds greeting dawn. They showed him visions of the first mortal tears, the first songs offered to the muses, the very moment when love first entered the world. They showed him Eurydice's thread of fate, how fragile it was, how brightly it burned. Some say the archivist, a blind titan older than memory itself, paused upon sensing Orpheus. It bowed its head, acknowledging a mortal whose grief had carved itself into the cosmos. When Orpheus finally took his place among the stars, or beneath the olive tree as some claim, the muses gathered one final time. They had guided him in life, but in death they sought to learn from him. Calliope, the muse of epic poetry and Orpheus's mother, laid her hand upon his lyre. In that touch she felt everything: his love, his pain, his triumph, his failure. His entire life became a single vibration, a note so pure it transcended the realms. They say she wept, though muses rarely do. The lyre glowed, threads of starlight weaving through its frame. Some versions say it rose into the sky that night, forming the constellation Lyra, a symbol of eternal devotion. Others say it remained, humming softly whenever moonlight touched its strings, guiding lovers and wanderers who passed beneath its branches. There are paths in the underworld seldom walked even by souls, corridors where silence pools like water and the air vibrates with ancient stillness. It was said Orpheus passed through these realms on his descent, and again in spirit long after his tale was complete. Here the ground was cool beneath bare feet, smooth as worn riverstone. Each step carried the softness of snowfall, leaving no prints behind. Above him, the ceiling dissolved into a vast darkness, not frightening, but calm, like the night sky before stars were born. A faint mist curled along the floor, brushing his ankles with cool threads of memory. With each breath, the air thickened with gentle echoes of places long forgotten. Old hearth smoke, the clean scent of rain on clay roofs, the distant laughter of mortals who no longer existed. He walked unhurriedly. The underworld shifted as he moved, its landscapes reshaping not from malice but from recognition. Caverns melted into long hallways lined with quiet murals. Fields of asphodel rippled softly, petals glowing faintly as if stirred by unseen winds. This walk was not a trial, it was remembrance. With every step he felt Eurydice nearby, not behind him, not ahead, simply present, as though grief had reshaped itself into a companion walking at his side. There were moments he paused, closing his eyes. The silence around him deepened, settling like dust upon still water. And in that silence, he found an unexpected peace. For even in death, even in myth, not every moment is shaped by sorrow. Some are shaped by the simple act of being. The tale of Orpheus is often told as tragedy, yet in the quiet folds of history, where stories soften with time, his journey offers something gentler. Grief, the ancients believed, was not an enemy to defeat, but a terrain to cross. It bends, it widens, it narrows. It becomes river, mountain, cavern, light. And though Orpheus stumbled, he walked its full length with devotion in his hands and love guiding every step. In this softened retelling, his final legacy is not in the moment he looked back, but in the courage it took to walk forward at all. When you breathe slowly now, listening to the story's final echoes, imagine him not as a figure carved in marble, but as someone who loved deeply, suffered deeply, and still found music in the world. Let this reflection settle like warm dusk in your thoughts. Let it ease the pace of your heartbeat. Let it guide you gently toward rest. And know that even the darkest journeys in myth end with quiet, with stillness, with a soft return to peace. There was said to be another river in the underworld, a lesser-known waterway untouched by mythic wars, invisible to poets, and uncharted even by Charon's practiced gaze. Its waters were silver, not black, and they moved so slowly that the surface appeared frozen. Orpheus once drifted along this hidden shoreline. Mist hovered like breath over glass. The air was cool and steady, free of judgment or memory. Even the faint currents moved with the gentleness of a sleeping child's exhale. Souls rarely visited this place. They passed too quickly into realms suited to their nature. But Orpheus, whose grief had carved unusual paths through the underworld, found this quiet passage waiting for him. He sat upon a smooth stone, fingers resting lightly on his lyre. Instead of playing, he listened. The river hummed with low, sustained tones, vibrations older than song, older than sorrow. They resonated softly through the stone beneath him and up through his bones. If he closed his eyes, he felt as though he drifted, suspended on a sound that never rose and never fell. This was not the Styx, nor the Lethe, nor the Acheron. It was something gentler, a river for those who needed stillness more than answers. Here time did not pass. It softened. Some chambers of the underworld were carved not from stone but from wind, vast curtain-like expanses where soft currents formed walls that shimmered like translucent cloth. The Hall of Gentle Winds was the largest of these, a place the living never heard of and the dead rarely remembered. When Orpheus stepped within it, the air shifted to greet him. Cool breezes brushed past his cheeks, carrying distant fragrances, crushed lavender, warm wheat, a hint of old cedarwood. They curled around him tenderly, as though tasting his presence. Every breeze in this hall moved slowly, patiently, like a caretaker smoothing the wrinkles from a blanket. With each exhale, Orpheus felt tension ease from his shoulders. With each inhale, he felt the hall breathe with him. The winds carried whispers, Not words, not memories, but tones. Long, sustained vowels that drifted like song without beginning or end. If he stood still enough, the sounds aligned with his heartbeat, forming a calming rhythm that lulled the mind toward rest. He walked deeper, each step stirring gentle eddies at his feet. The winds swirled upward in slow spirals, tracing patterns that resembled drifting constellations. Some say the muses crafted this hall long ago, weaving their breath into its architecture so that weary souls might find rest here. Perhaps they built it for Orpheus, or perhaps he simply belonged in places shaped by stillness. Beyond the hall of gentle winds lay a soft decline, leading to a grove that existed outside of time. Its trees bore fruit of every season: autumn figs, summer peaches, spring pomegranates, winter pears, all ripening together in endless harmony. The orchard without seasons was not meant for nourishment. The fruit dissolved into light at the slightest touch. Instead, its branches offered something subtler: the comfort of familiarity. Orpheus wandered between the trees, reaching out occasionally to brush a glowing fig or a pear that shone like moonlit snow. The fruits flickered in response, releasing small pulses of warmth that hovered in the air before fading. Above him, leaves rustled not from wind, but from memory. Each leaf held a soft echo of the mortal world: hearth crackles, the distant rumble of storms, the laughter of friends long gone. These sounds drifted down like tender snowfall. He breathed deeply. Every inhalation carried the faint sweetness of ripened fruit and wood smoke. Every exhalation sent small ripples through the grove, making the branches shimmer. Time loosened here, unraveling like thread. The orchard asked nothing of him. It offered only presence. Far beneath the orchard lay a cavern untouched by footsteps, where the ceiling opened to reveal a sky that was not a sky at all. Instead, thousands of tiny lights drifted downward, slow, luminous motes that resembled stars shedding their glow. Orpheus entered quietly, as though afraid to disturb the gentle descent. The air was warm here, tinged with the faint scent of burning cedar. Each glowing mote floated downward in lazy spirals, illuminating the cavern with soft gold. When they touched the ground, they faded into mist, leaving no trace. He walked through them slowly. Some brushed against his shoulders, leaving fleeting warmth. Others drifted across the strings of his lyre, making them hum with soft, harmonic tones. This chamber was a place of endings, not tragic ones, but gentle conclusions, like the final chord of a lullaby or the last ember of a candle burning low. He lay upon the cavern floor, watching the falling lights. They reminded him of nights spent beneath mortal skies, Eurydice's head resting lightly on his shoulder. For a moment, he felt the world breathe with him. For a moment, he felt held. And so, traveler, we close this extended tale, rich with shadow, memory, and the lingering chords of a love that shaped worlds. Let this long journey, 3 hours or more in the telling, remind you that within every ancient story lies a quiet reflection of ourselves. If your evening has softened, if your thoughts have slowed, if you feel the faint warmth of old myth settling around you like a blanket, then rest, knowing the story has done its work. Until our next tale, sleep well. And so, traveler, we close this chapter of myth and memory. May the tale of Orpheus remind you that grief, though heavy, is shaped by love, and that even in loss, something gentle remains. If this story has guided your thoughts, quieted your evening, or softened the noise of the world, then linger here a moment longer. And when you next seek refuge in another ancient tale, I will be here, waiting among the echoes of history. Until then, rest well, and please subscribe for more.